Alright guys, we're quite a Formula 1 news. The final week of testing is underway and a raft of storylines emerging. Ferrari with a shocking new device they've installed on the rear of their car that apparently no other team will be able to copy, but is worth at least 2/10 worth of performance in the loophole that they have found. But Mercedes compression ratio power unit drama, that story continues. The FIA have made a statement. They will look to change the way that it is measured, but they will only do so from the 1st of August after the 13th round of this season. Is this corruption? Have Mercedes escaped punishment? What do you guys think in the comments? Very much into your thoughts down there. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. Let's get into it. First of all, the starting procedure. There was lots of talk about that today. They actually did one right at the end of the day with a couple of alterations. This is what the drivers said. Valtteri Bottas says, definitely not more dangerous before. Don't know what McLaren are crying about. Hamilton says it's definitely not dangerous. Should probably take that connotation away. Now, of course, with Hamilton saying this and with Bottas saying this, they both use the Ferrari engine with the Ferrari turbo, which we understand they have designed in such a way that the spooling up issue, the getting the battery and holding it at the right level problem that the drivers are currently suffering with isn't such a big deal for Ferrari, whereas it is for, let's say, the Mercedes power teams. So Hamilton and Bottas saying this was like, okay, no surprise, lads, you don't want any changes. But Verstappen echoed similar thoughts. He said, yeah, I don't know what they're talking about. If you want to start from the pit lane, you're welcome to, is what Max Verstappen said, if you feel like it's not, or if you feel like it's not safe and it's too dangerous. Now, they decided to do a slightly different version of the test start at the end of the day, adding in an extra blue light 5-second window. So this start did go ahead and every car gets off the grid. Now you can see here the Audi has a pretty bad start, so the Cadillac has to go around it. But it wasn't like the Audi didn't get away at all. It wasn't great, but, you know, we see these things, right? Bad starts, and we're going to see more of them. It doesn't strike me as that it's like an outrageously dangerous setup. The drivers certainly seem to be in agreement with that, but who knows? If McLaren cry safety enough, and maybe they've got a point, changes might well be made. Another update on Audi. This is the side of their car, spotted with what looks like a burn mark or something of that sort on the side of the rear of the side pod. There's a feeling here that the engine, of course, no other car is using the Audi engine, might be running a little hot and a little close to the side of the car, and it could be causing a couple of issues. So that's one to keep an eye on. The other update I want to give is on Red Bull, because they have changed their car. They've brought some upgrades this weekend. Again, changed their side pod, of course, theoretically an upgrade. This is how it looked last time out, which is a rather more basic version of what it is now. You know, this is right at the start of that existing like livery. This is what they're going for now with a more pronounced undercut. They've added this cooling duct on the side of the car. Ferrari have done the same thing, actually. We'll discuss that in a second, because in many respects, Ferrari arguably the key talking point again of the day. Yesterday, Ferrari were a key talking point because they were one of the only teams, in addition to Audi, that the fuel has been homologated. That's true for Ferrari, Haas, Cadillac and Audi, and now we understand it is true for Red Bull as well. ExxonMobil, they've received the green light. Their fuel is ready to go. Not yet for Mercedes, as we understand. So that seems to be still a bit of a race against time. But let's talk Ferrari, because at the start of the day, Leclerc was putting that Ferrari right to the top of the timesheets. This lap time held up pretty well, to be honest, all day long. But the key talking point with that team was this new loophole that they have found a way to exploit. De Kessa says the FIA gave the okay finally last night to approve this loophole. It brings non-negligible advantages. Very well done to the Ferrari staff. This has positively modified the work of the test. This is what we are talking about here. So we see the exhaust of the car. We can also see here some changes to the engine cover. This is a new duct. They've changed the shape here to have those kind of, cannons, people call them, to the rear of the car. Now, what you will notice, of course, with these rear wings, there's no beam wing this year. You've got the rear wing. There used to be a beam wing coming across this way, basically around by the exhaust. That no longer exists in these regs. So what can you do with the airflow in that area? Ferrari have come up with this rectangle that they're able to put in here to, utilize some of the gases coming out of the exhaust. My understanding is that with no MGU-H, the gases coming out of the exhaust come out with much more energy than we have previously seen. So ideally you don't want all that charged up hot air just firing away to no use. You want to utilize it aerodynamically if you can. So right in front of the exhaust, they've managed to put this rectangular thing in. And again, the implications of what this is going to do, you've got this crash structure at the back. Of course, the diffuser is down here below. The idea would be that you can use that airflow in such a way to help give you higher energy air further down so that you can generate more downforce from the diffuser. There is kind of a blown diffuser feel about this, right? Like using the hot exhaust gases to generate more downforce. I'm not sure that's exactly the right explanation, but there is a bit of that going on here. And the question has been, okay, what sort of advantage does this yield? If you look at the Ferrari from the last couple of weeks, and if you look at any other car, it does not have this strange rectangular box. None of the other cars have this, right? Their exhaust gases just go straight backwards. But and it's not just the rectangle, there's other elements here that they've got too. But this is something that no other team has done, and apparently no other team even can do. And we'll discuss why on that one in a second. The feeling is this could be worth 0.2 of a second, 1/10.5, 2.5 tenths. That's a pretty big deal, right? For something like this, to generate that much, to convert some of the exhaust gases into more downforce, that's a big deal. Apparently, Andrea Stella had a very close look at it this morning when, I don't know, the car was in the pit lane or something to see exactly what they're doing. This is another very interesting angle of it right here. So, very unorthodox stuff, and there's a feeling that this is an edge that Ferrari either deliberately held back until now so that teams have no time to copy it, or they were forced to hold it back because it wasn't yet approved. That's what the guys at Auto Racer say. They had to wait a long time. Yeah, they discuss here that given the lack of MGUH and the rear wing, the exhaust gases are much more energetic, so you want to manage that if you can. The solution had to wait a long time for approval from the Federation because it was considered a borderline solution, a very aggressive interpretation of the technical regs in terms of the volumes used. Ferrari wanted to exploit this to try to surgically control the quality of the flow exiting the diffuser. It's a subtle but very ambitious undertaking. I'll leave the full article down below as ever. So this is the key component people are talking about on the Ferrari. It appears that they had to wait in order to get this approved, and then once they did get it approved, which is a big deal, certainly the other teams might be questioning it, who knows, they've changed their run plan. I think it was meant to just be Leclerc today, but they put both of their drivers in so that they can both give feedback in the technical briefings currently underway on what they felt about this, whether it was good or bad. Hamilton at lunchtime was very positive, but he got in the car back again in the afternoon. This is why it appears to be legal. So Craig Scarborough explains here, and there's been discussion on these are the legality boxes, right? So when you're designing the car, the regulations define a box with a certain area and points which it's defined to that determine what you can put in that box. Now, what's interesting about these is often the boxes are relative to one another. So, for example, if you move the cockpit position of the car, it opens up the opportunity to change where you put the nose. If you have the cockpit in either of the extreme positions, it moves the legality boxes around so that you have limited options. That appears to be what's happening at the rear of the car, because I think Ferrari, these stays that are in these blue legality boxes, I think Ferrari have pushed them quite forward compared to where the other teams are. And, well, anyway, whatever they've done with them, it moves the boxes, because the box that they're putting this in, I think, is linked to the other boxes. So as a result, the whole architecture of the rear of the car has opened up this possibility to use a bit of aerodynamic work in this area. The reason why this is important is because if the other teams have not gone for this, which it doesn't seem like they have, there is no way that they can without entirely redesigning the rear of the car, because their legality boxes with their design, it simply doesn't work. Whereas Ferrari have made a compromise in one area in order to exploit this. And it doesn't appear to be something which, as I understand it, any other team is going to be able to just copy. It's not like they can say, oh, they've put a rectangle on the back of their car, we'll do the same. It's not as simple as that. Apparently the car also sounds different because of this, so again, there is a little blown diffuser thing going on here, and that's what people trackside said, that the exhaust sounds noticeably different. So does it sound better or worse? It sounds like more downforce as far as I'm concerned. The Ferrari did have a problem today. The DHL fastest pit stop champions from last year, they were in the garage messing around with things. Probably the first issue that they've really had at all, which it's not a bad time to have it. And our understanding is that it wasn't engine related. Hamilton didn't get as much track time as he would have liked because apparently a load of sensors went haywire with the car, which caused a few issues, but they got it resolved. It wasn't like a crazy engine issue or anything. Hamilton was back out on track, pumping in some decent lap times. So, yeah, Ferrari had an issue, better now than Melbourne, and not bad to have a problem, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. As long as the engine's not blown up, that would be a concern for multiple reasons. There's also discussion that the Ferrari today, certainly in the morning, looked really nice. Stable, good on traction. Charles was taking a lot of corners, flat out. That was not the case previously. Less hesitation on traction. So it feels like at the front of the car still looks relatively basic, you might argue. But there's a lot of really interesting things on the floor, at the back of the floor, and certainly in that diffuser section that Ferrari have done to, as it stands, look to be very well positioned indeed. They, however, did not have the fastest lap time of the day. That looked like it was going to go to Oscar Piastri with a 1:33.469, but George Russell, not long after, put in a 1:33.459 to go a hundredth quicker at the top of the timesheets. So, yeah, you might look at the standings and say, well, that's a lot of Mercedes engines in the top 10, and you wouldn't be wrong. What was not in the top 10 was the Aston Martin. This is a very strange crash. Lance Stroll comes into turn 11, and on entry, the rears just seem to basically lock up on him. It snaps out of the way, and he has absolutely nothing he can do as he goes into the gravel. It was a really weird crash. You can see it from this angle especially, where he's coming onto the standard braking zone. Now, there was a bit of talk about the active aero here, because you guys can see the active aero on the rear wing has already closed. On the front wing, it closes. Well, does it close? I mean, maybe it does. It's very subtle anyway. Probably it does close. It's just, there's not much difference on these front wings. Anyway, it doesn't appear that was the issue. It was something gearbox or engine related, because according to the tracer, at that turn 11 point, the engine just died for some reason. I mean, look what happened with the gearbox here. So there was some sort of issue there, and they did get Lance Stroll back out on track, but again, not an ideal day for Aston. The pace, however, was better with respect to the top teams. Instead of being 4.5 seconds off, they were maybe 2.5, 3 seconds off, which is not great, but it is seemingly a little bit of progress. There was also this noted, so Watanabe, the top guy at HRC or whatever it is, basically the Honda engine division, he's there in Bahrain. And I don't know if people expected him there, so the fact that he is there this week maybe implies that they've got some work to do. Some of the long runs for Mercedes, we're going to discuss their engine right about now and some of that drama, were very, very impressive today. I think Scott Mitchell-Malm said from trackside, the Mercedes looked like the most impressive car out there, and that's not even considering the engine advantage that they may still be enjoying and may enjoy for the next 6 months or so. These were some of the long-run pace data. Just the consistency here was very, very impressive. The lap times, okay, they are what they are, right? It's difficult to judge. But even this, he did another stint, and he did have a 1:36.0. But apart from that, I mean, look at the consistency. This is pretty scary, because usually this is a car that's handling very well, right? If the drivers are able to pump out 0.5, 0.6, 0.4, 0.5, 0.7, and the outlier is a quicker one, not a slower one, then, that's a pretty good sign, I think. So Mercedes, I'm sure, will come away from today pretty happy. Ferrari would also be well positioned, we think. Alex Albon was asked the question, who do you think benefits from the style required for these cars? And he says he thinks Lewis Hamilton. He makes the corners really short, he doesn't focus on exits so much. You can actually see that in some of the data, the way that Hamilton takes these corners. He's back at it again. He's braking really late for some of these corners. And this is the style that he made work for a long time in Formula 1. Didn't work so well in the ground effect era. He's doing it again here in 2026, and it does appear to be bearing better fruit. Albon says it should be advantageous. Hamilton even goes as far to say, the car's performance genuinely excites me. Working with this new generation of cars is a very different experience. We're trying to figure everything out from scratch. Last year I had to race a car whose baseline I inherited from someone else, but this year's car is a model I personally helped to develop in the simulator over the last 8 to 10 months. It has got my DNA in it, so I feel much more connected to this car. Presumably because he's given insight on how they should build it. Seems to be looking pretty good at the moment. But also, maybe the regulations just naturally suit Hamilton a little bit better than the previous ones did. The question for Ferrari is, with all the positivity around them, it might not be enough because of the compression ratio related drama. So the F1 Commission met today on a couple of things. One thing they discussed was the possibility of doubling the number of sprint races. Who is shocked? Because promoters like it because it makes more money. Do fans like it? Probably some fans do. I think, look, I'm not a big fan of sprints. I don't mind the occasional one, but this is getting closer and closer to a MotoGP style. There's a sprint every weekend. I really don't want to go there. So that's discussion anyway. It's not guaranteed. However, after some rumours, they officially confirmed what they're going to do with this compression ratio trick. So effectively, Mercedes, we believe, have found a way to create a loophole whereby in ambient temperatures at static conditions, the engine indeed does have a 16:1 compression ratio, which is the maximum mandated, but when it's actually running, they're able to get closer to 17 or to 18 or something in that kind of ballpark. The other teams aren't very happy about this, but the regulations as written describes that, well, this is the limit and this is where it is measured. So if you pass that test, it's okay. The other teams, though, however, not so happy about it. So the FIA today confirmed what they're going to do about this after a long time coming. I think the teams still need to vote. 4 or 5 of them will still need to vote on this. Presumably they will approve it, but this is the proposition that they've come up with. There was also another rumour that the Mercedes engine was tested at higher temperatures. We're talking 50, 60 degrees rather than, let's say, 20 at room temperature, and it was still passing the test. So I do wonder if Mercedes could potentially get very clever and find a way of still passing the test at the new temperature. But what they're proposing is that from the 1st of August this year, they will instead test in ambient conditions, but also at a representative operating temperature of 130 degrees. How smart can Mercedes get? Good question. But one would theorize, if this is passed in the coming days as we would expect it to be by 4 of the 5 manufacturers that presumably will vote for this, this will require Mercedes to rework their engine to a certain extent. This, to me, is a quite understandable outcome. As controversial as it might be, that they're not changing things immediately and banning what Mercedes are currently doing. To some extent, they're admitting, maybe, that Mercedes, yeah, they've got a loophole, they're gaining an advantage from it. It's certainly against the spirit of the regulations, but is there any real such thing? You can make a viable argument to say that, well, Mercedes, yeah, they're using a loophole in the rules, but technically they've not broken the rules. So is it fair to bar them from competing in the opening rounds because they wouldn't be able to change their engine in time? Look, it's obviously going to be frustrating for the other teams that this proposition isn't coming in on the 1st of March, but this is, to me, a reasonable and expected compromise. Mercedes get half a season to exploit the engineering innovation that they've come up with, and that will be true for their Mercedes-powered teams as well. After that, presumably, unless they can find a way to still pass the test at the new temperatures, which I wouldn't put past these Formula 1 engineers, they will have to make changes. Presumably 6 months is a long enough time window for them to be able to do that. It does raise some questions on number of power units, right? Because typically the limit is 4 for a season. So what are they going to do? Because halfway through the year, they're going to have to put a new one in because if the old one doesn't comply. So are they going to run 2 for the halfway point? Are they going to try and go for 3 and extends really where they can get to? But also Mercedes, they're not going to try to show their whole hand because there's ADUO implications. If you're incredibly strong, and everyone knows it, then all the other teams will get more time to develop their engines. So if you're Mercedes, you want to win by a smidge, not a mile. So there's always these games to be played right here. The reality is it looks like they have made a call and the FIA are stepping in and they're saying, Mercedes, you can't do this for too much longer. There was some discussion that it might be for next year that they would make this change, but it appears that it will be this year, but it will be mid-season. I think it comes around about where Zandvoort is. This is even, 1st of August, it's before when the end of the European stint is at Madrid, I think, which is in September. So you could argue that Mercedes, George Russell, have half a season to put the pedal to the metal and see where the championship standings lie. And then for the second half of the year, I don't know. We obviously have no idea how it's going to play out, and it might not be this big of a deal. But I think if you're Ferrari, you might have to accept, okay, Mercedes might have an edge for the first half of the season, but if we can stay in the ballpark, then in the second half of the year, it might still be all to play for. So tweet your thoughts in the comments. Just a couple of final things on this energy deployment and all this. Scott Mitchell was talking about how there is a big variable here because teams, based on their gearings and based on their own cars, will have a different optimal energy deployment strategy. And this is kind of interesting because you might theorize that, well, there's one best way to use your energy, where to deploy, where to recover, where to harvest, as it used to be known. I don't think they call it that anymore, but whatever. You get the picture. For example, turn 12 in Bahrain, we saw teams super clipping, which is where effectively the MGUK is braking while they're at full throttle to recover energy. As a result, they were going far slower through turn 12 than would normally be the case. But that's not always the case. And Mercedes, on the back straight coming out of turn 10, they were super clipping to charge the battery, but Red Bull aren't doing that, actually. So that's interesting because in a race dynamic, that changes things. Because if each team has their own approach to energy management during a Grand Prix lap, then it means that at different parts of the lap, some teams will be much faster than others, which creates interesting overtaking dynamics. I don't know. I'm not saying these regs are good, I don't think they are, but I'm going to give them a little bit more time before we make an absolute final conclusion, because just before we discuss this was noted on Piastri's fastest lap that through turn 12, he was at 259 kph, which is similar to where last year's cars were and similar to what we've had for some time. So this is a non-super clipping dynamic. Now, yes, this is a qualifying lap, but it's true that the McLaren today on their quali simulation run, where Piastri did set the fastest lap time for a bit, they were not harvesting through the MGUK through turn 12. That was not necessary with their run, and it ended up delivering them a purple lap. So yes, now in a race condition, that probably looks different, but over a single lap, there is some viability in that. Laurent Marquis is back this weekend. He had some minor surgery, not sure what that was. He wasn't here last time out, but he is back this time, and he says that Red Bull are confident, but we're definitely not the benchmark. Mercedes, McLaren and Ferrari are well ahead. So, look, who do we believe at this point? We don't know. Everyone's trying to play themselves down. And Max says, I was asked a question on my thoughts on the regs, and I gave my thoughts. That's what I did. I was just being honest. We live with freedom of speech in this world. Max says, overall, we're happy with the car. We left behind most of the chronic problems that we experienced in the past. These were the numbers of the day. So Russell, Piastri, Leclerc about 3/10 back. 70 laps out of Leclerc. Hamilton actually got 44 laps. It was pretty interesting after some of the delays that they suffered with. Antonelli, Norris, some usual suspect up at the top. It does appear that McLaren had a bit of a better day today after some discussion on, oh no, we're nowhere near, I don't know what you guys are talking about. But they did have a solid showing, and also worth noting that Mercedes bounced back quite well from last week's difficult running. They had some of the fewest laps of anyone. This week, back on top straight away, 145 from George Russell and Kimi Antonelli combined. Most teams over the 100 mark. Not true for Red Bull, they had some issues, and Isaac Hadjar didn't didn't seem especially fast, and then Cadillac and unfortunately Aston Martin, the usual suspects, not doing as many laps as they would have liked to. But very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.